I was lining the window of my flower shop with pale ranunculus and thin-necked tulips that looked like they'd been taught to bow when my phone buzzed against the ledger. A single tremor that felt like a splinter under the nail. I wiped potting grit from my fingers and glanced at the screen, expecting the usual, an order change from a bride who'd suddenly decided peonies meant betrayal. My landlord reminding me about the boiler on Sable Street. My husband asking if I'd seen his gray windbreaker, but the preview showed Serif's name. The contact I never needed a last name for because she'd known mine since we were 12 and practicing signatures we planned to abandon, and below it, the first line. He's already at Marin Point, I'll keep her with me an hour, meet me by the service stairs. No more hiding. For a second the words didn't arrange into meaning, they were gnats over water. Tiny and everywhere, and then they flew in formation and became the fact I had been walking around for months without wanting to name. The fact with his initials on it and her breath in it. And I put the phone face down as if it were hot. Outside, Whitlock City performed its steady trick of looking honest, buses kneeling, bakery windows sweating sugar into the noon. A man on Sable pacing with a black-edged napkin jammed in his fist like he was rehearsing the end of something, and inside, my shop hummed like a throat before the cry. I finished wiring the stems because muscle memory is a kind of sanctuary. Tied a smoke gray ribbon because clients like to feel seen inside their tastes. Then turned the sign to closed 15 minutes early and told my assistant I was stepping out for a vendor issue, which was true if you counted the vendor of truth. Kellen had said he was at the Whitcomb district office, the glass-walled one that made the sky look like it was for sale, reviewing a bid. Serif had told me she'd swing by at 5 with lemon pastries and an apology for being late all week. Instead, she had texted me the choreography of my absence like it was a favor to the dance. I took the cracked-faced watch I keep on the sill, the one my mother wore until it yawned, a thin white fissure across its glass like a seam in ice, and fastened it even though I never look at it for time. I opened the hallway window and let the room inhale the salt thin air moving the white curtain like a chest remembering breath. And then I grabbed my keys from the hook shaped like a gull and walked into the day as if I had already survived it. The road to Marin Point ribs the coast. A silvered bruise where the water keeps rubbing at the land. I drove with the radio off, the tires reading the asphalt like a familiar letter, and noted, because I knew I would need neutral detail later to keep from drowning in the subjective, the way the tall grass flickered like chainmail in the wind, the way the tide line stitched a pale seam along the shore, the way my phone lay face down in the cup holder like a sleeping animal I refused to wake for fear it would speak. Marin Point's hotel, the seawall, likes to pretend it has always been there. It wears cedar shingles the color of patience. And the ocean-facing windows are so clean they make you wonder if glass is a kind of lying. And there's a loading lane at the back where box trucks breathe like old men and a set of service stairs that hug the building's spine. Which I knew because 2 birthdays ago I had smuggled in a cake with his initials burned into sugar and had learned, courtesy of a maintenance guy with a crush on celebration, that the south service door swells in fog and never latches. Serif's text said service stairs. I watched from the corner of Alder Key where deliveries back in and saw our car-shaped silhouette parked sideways like someone trying to be discreet by being obvious. I didn't walk up and knock on the window and give myself that cinematic ruin. I slipped through the always ajar door into the bleach and lemons corridor where the breaker Panels hum like a warning you can pass for a lullaby if you've trained yourself to be good. And I followed the muffled geography of voices. I knew the way you know your own lungs. Hers first, low, coaxing, that soot-soft thickness she uses when she's about to do a kind thing. That benefits her, and then his, lower still. My name-saying register that once made me think I was held by something larger than myself. I stopped at the corner where the lounge splits into a private room in the ocean and caught them not with my eyes but with their reflection in a smoked panel leaning against the wall, a dark oblong giving me the suggestion of their faces and the whole of their posture. Which was enough, his hip against the table, the way he rests when he's preparing to refuse something gently, her hands open in a posture that looks like prayer but is really a bid for absolution. We shouldn't keep lying, she said. And I watched the sentence leave her mouth like she hoped it would absolve her by being noble. In the saying, we'll tell her, he said, not yet, she's been fragile. And I looked at the ocean behind them where a gull skated its blade along the wind and thought, how convenient a word fragile is when you need a woman to stay still. I didn't gasp, I didn't bolt, I didn't make a noise that would recruit the carpet to my cause. I stepped backward until the breaker hum retreated, and I left the way I came in, my fingers sweeping the door so it settled without a sound. And I walked along Alder Quay counting the bolts in the dock like a child learning math with objects, and when I reached the car, I sat and placed both hands on the wheel and watched them become the hands of a steadier woman. Until mine believed them. At home, the hallway window was still ajar and the room smelled like salt and iron and the almond of the hand soap Seraph gave me last winter when we were both failing to say we were drowning. I closed the window, then opened it again because muscle memory can be made new on purpose. I turned the wedding photograph on the shelf face down. Not from rage but to teach the shelf a different grammar. I put the cracked watch on the counter beside a yellow envelope and wrote in small letters on its flap, later. That night, when Kellen came in smelling like a cologne ad underwriting a debt, he kissed the air near my cheek and said something about the bid. I nodded and asked if he'd seen Seraph today because she'd promised pastries and owed me a sip of gossip, and he played the piano of his face with practiced fingers, 2 keys of surprise. One of gentle laughter, then the soft pedal of casual no, and I felt a strange mercy rise in me. Not for him, but for the part of me that was learning to live without a narrator. I didn't confront him because confrontation is often an audition for a part you've already been denied. Instead, in the morning, I took the yellow envelope to Iris Wren, who keeps an office above a locksmith where the hallway smells like metal and lemon oil and decisions, and I said, I need to leave and still like the sound of my own voice. And she slid me a legal pad and said, write what you want to own and what you're willing to mourn. We made a list that refused to perform fairness as theater. The deed to the Larkspur Avenue house, which, I discovered, had been quietly braided to a credit line named for a bird, the shop lease. The accounts, his with nouns that sounded like geology. Mine with nouns that sounded like survival. The dog's vet file. The little savings my grandmother walled off for when you must do something you're afraid of. Iris called it choreography. I called it coming home to my own hands. For 2 weeks I was the weather, polite at the surface, storm on paper. I laughed in the right places and stamped in the right offices. I rekeyed the shop and told my assistant, Ray, she could take Wednesday mornings off and mean it. I used the hallway window like a tide chart. I slept with the cheap wall clock ticking like an ordinary heart in a quiet chest. When the papers were ready, I invited Kellen to Bellwether, the restaurant with clinking cutlery and a habit of catching reflections in its windows like they were birds. He arrived in the gray windbreaker I'd been pretending not to recognize and smiled with that curated warmth that makes strangers think this is a man who reads. I ordered the trout because ritual can be leveraged as anesthesia. We spoke about the neighborhood council and the new mural on Sable and how the baker on Lumen Corner had finally switched to cashless. And then the light slid down the glass like a hand and I put the yellow envelope between our plates and said, "This has a beginning and an end. You'll know which is which by how it feels when you sign." He lifted the flap like a priest about to bless or condemn. His eyes moved over the words, stipulated dissolution, division schedule, deed transfer, non-disparagement, and when they climbed back to me, I watched him reach for the only weapon he trusts, which is a story about my softness. "We could try again," he said, the vowels buttered. "Maybe you're projecting something from before. And it would have worked in the year when my mother's illness taught me to let men narrate pain, but tonight I had my own subtitles." "I'm not angry," I said, "I'm finished." The phone he'd left face up for credit buzzed on the linen with a new message. I didn't mean to look, but the human eye follows light. And I saw the name I'd never needed to doubt to recognize, Seraph, and the words. I told her I was running late. "Freight stairs in 10, I'll cover, be quick." He flipped the phone face down as if hiding a mirror covers your mouth. And he opened his hands like surrender or reaching. I tipped in cash because bills make a sound. And I walked to the door before he could ask me to perform the part where I remind him that he is still the main character in a story I no longer publish. Seraph texted me at 9:02, a confession disguised as care. "Can I come by with wine? I miss your face," and I said yes because I wanted to watch my yes become a new animal. And I added bring his windbreaker. He left it. I folded the jacket under the hallway window, the curtain breathing like a patient who has learned to trust air again. And I made tea because boiling water in a house you own is a secular prayer. When she knocked, she used a soft rhythm, the one for grief. And in the doorway she looked like both the girl who stole blackberries with me behind our school and the woman who perfected the art of borrowing other people's mercy. She said I looked tired and the part of my body trained for friendship flinched toward the reflex of honesty, but I held still and led her to the counter where the windbreaker waited like evidence pretending to be a coat. "You forgot this," I said, and the sentence hung between us like a bridge being measured. And she touched the fabric and then took her hand back and said we were going to tell you. And I said you did, and her face rearranged to accommodate a world in which she is not the messenger of her own goodness. We talked without nouns the way people circle graves. I didn't say betrayal and she didn't say love. I said I'm dissolving what makes this conversation necessary. She said I never wanted to hurt you and I said I know and also I don't care about want. I said I will not be here for the part where you move a toothbrush into a drawer I used to own. She said that sounds cruel and I said that sounds precise. She cried and I let the sound pass through me like weather. When she asked if there was anything she could do to make it right, I looked at her and saw the woman who had once sat on my kitchen floor at midnight and ate cold noodles with me out of the pot and said you can be a house no one can burn, and I said yes. You can stop texting me when you want me to absolve you. And she nodded like a person rehearsing not a promise but a line. And I walked her to the door and did not hug her because I didn't want my body to become a museum. The filing took its measured weeks, days that opened like clean envelopes. And in each I did one thing that made the next day lighter. I moved the joint account into separate columns. I transferred the deed with Iris's steady pen. I changed the shop alarm code to something that did not contain our anniversary. I told Ray she could handle Saturday mornings alone and watched her not disappoint me. I threw away the black-edged napkin I kept for nights I thought elegance could substitute for peace. I checked the cracked watch and decided not to fix it because the line across its glass now felt like an honesty I could wear. I saw Kellen once on Larkspur, both of us pretending to be errands in shoes. And we exchanged the two lines that simulate humanity in front of a storefront. And afterward I sat in Café Lumen with my hands around a cup and listened to the clink of cutlery and the rain begin to tick against the window like small change. And I understood something I'd heard and not believed. How the body keeps living even when a category dies. The decree arrived on a Tuesday, pale as an unlit room. Iris texted done. A period like an anchor, and I walked to the registry, retrieved the stamped copies, and carried them home in a yellow envelope like a small sun I could finally touch. I put the packet on the counter beneath the hallway window and opened the sash. And the night came in tasting of nickel and rosemary and distant rain. And somewhere a train on the far tracks let go a single note that felt like someone undoing a knot you had given up on, and I stood there with my palms flat and my pulse slow and thought of the first text, the partial sentence that rearranged my winter. And I took my phone and scrolled. The thread with Seraph glowed with the long archive of us, memes and recipes, and the photo of my mother's cracked watch on the day she gave it to me and said you'll know when to repair it and when to wear the damage. And I typed nothing because there are silences you rent and silences you own, and I wanted the deed to this one. I turned the wedding photo face up just long enough to memorize the color of the sky the day we made a promise we believed, then slid it into a drawer and later carried the drawer to the alley and left it beside the recycle bin like shedding a husk. I texted Ray to open tomorrow. I texted Iris a row of peonies. I texted my mother a heart the exact pale gold of sliced lemon on glass. In the morning I will sweep the shop and put new water in the buckets and accept that people celebrate things for reasons I can't keep safe for them. And I will put a small sign in the window that says fresh ranunculus, ask for the soft ones. And someone will come in and ask for the soft ones, and I will hand them over like proof. Tonight, I stand at the hallway window as the curtain lifts and settles, lifts and settles. And the rain starts in earnest, sharp, quick. 100 small taps on the glass like someone practicing forgiveness, and the city beyond Whitlock's lampposts goes the color of deep blue I've learned means the dark can be kind if you ask it, and in the room the cracked watch keeps its honest heartbeat. And the yellow envelope holds the future I signed for. And I open the window 1 inch more and let the air write the final line across my skin. Quiet. Salt sweet and steady, the house breathing, the night remembering. The sash settling like a verdict I chose.